There are games that we immediately enjoy and it's easy to get started. On the other hand, some games take time to appreciate. They may not be enjoyable at first, but as we play them more, we start to like them. In today's video, we're talking about great games that many players hate at first, but later grow to love. Then without wasting more time, let's get into the video. Platinum Games is known for making challenging games, and the wonderful 101 is no exception. Even though it looks colorful and kid-friendly, designed specifically for Nintendo consoles, it doesn't go easy on players, especially newcomers. In fact, it might be one of the hardest games for beginners. The game has a unique blend of Pikmin-style gameplay and fast-paced action similar to Devil May Cry. Right from the start, it throws players into chaotic action, introducing new concepts before you've even mastered the basics. This can be overwhelming, and the game doesn't always make things clear, especially with important mechanics like the lock-on ability, which other games might highlight more clearly. Additionally, essential abilities like the Stinger attack and deflect need to be bought in the in-game store. These important moves are mixed in with less crucial upgrades, making it tough to figure out what you really need. For new players, the combination of confusing controls and difficult mechanics can be frustrating, leading many to give up early. However, for those who stick with it, the wonderful 101 rewards them with one of Platinum's most impressive games. The game's finale is completely over the top and remains one of the most memorable in action games. Even though Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance came out after, it still doesn't top the excitement and craziness of this game's ending. The controls are complex and take time to master, but once you get the hang of them, the wonderful 101 stands as one of the best action games ever made. Dragon's Dogma is a game that was ahead of its time in many ways. While it did have some rough edges, its blend of Skyrim and Monster Hunter was a bold and forward-thinking combination, even if the final result was a bit odd in how it merged these ideas. Despite its flaws, Dragon's Dogma is an excellent game that deserves more attention. One reason it didn't gain widespread attention initially is because it overwhelms players right from the start. The opening hours are filled with clunky tutorials and awkward gameplay that don't effectively showcase the game's strengths, especially its combat system. It takes time for the game to reveal its true quality, but by then, many players had already moved on. The opening hours are definitely a bit confusing, and even fans of the game will admit that you need to push through the rough start before it really clicks. The difficulty no longer feels punishing, but instead it becomes an engaging part of the experience. Once you start unlocking abilities, team up with pawns who are actually helpful, and take on huge monsters, the game starts to shine and becomes the charming classic we all know and love. But those first few hours are definitely a challenge.
Whoa, ground? Wait a minute.
One of the most defining features of the Dead Rising series is its time limit mechanic. When a game has a time limit, it can be annoying and make the experience less enjoyable. In Dead Rising series, this time limit is a major part of the gameplay experience. You play as a character named Frank West, who starts off weak and slow. With zombies everywhere, it can be tough to survive. The time limit adds to the challenge, making it difficult to complete tasks before time runs out. At the beginning, the game can be slow and frustrating. The time limit makes it even worse. You may find yourself running out of time or dying due to the tough enemies in the game. However, as you progress and get stronger, the game becomes more enjoyable. You learn new moves, get better weapons, and find useful items, making fights easier. Although it can be frustrating at first, the game becomes more fun as you progress. The time limit is still a challenge, but it's part of what makes the game exciting. Overall, Dead Rising is a unique and cool game from Capcom. While it has some challenges, especially at the beginning, it's worth playing. The time limit is a key part of the game, and it's what makes Dead Rising stand out from other games. Prey is a game that makes a strong first impression with an opening sequence that is still considered one of the best. However, after the prologue, the game may seem like a typical first-person shooter with some limitations. The controls can feel a bit clumsy, and the story appears straightforward at first, but as the game progresses, it becomes more interesting and complex. One of the unique aspects of Prey is the use of special abilities such as the glue gun, which can be used in creative ways to solve problems and access new areas. The story also becomes more engaging with multiple choices that can influence the outcome of events. At first, Prey might remind you of a modern BioShock, but it soon becomes clear that it's much larger and more interconnected. The station you're exploring feels alive, with each area changing as you move forward. You can approach every space from different angles, and there are many ways to solve problems, all of which feel natural to the experience. Prey can be described as an immersive sim sandbox game similar to Deus Ex, but with a more open and interconnected world. While it may not be as scary as some other games such as Dead Space, it has its own unique qualities that make it a great gaming experience. Overall, Prey is a game that is easy to underestimate, but it has a lot to offer and is definitely worth playing. Rainworld is a game that has gone through a significant shift in perception. Initially, it received a mixed response, but now it enjoys overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. This change is partly due to updates from the developers, but also because of how players have interacted with the game. Rainworld is a brutal and unforgiving experience. Its mechanics are complex, the controls are unusual, and it's easy to find yourself in an unwinnable situation. While this might sound like a downside for many games, Rainworld makes it work. It isn't exactly a roguelike or a Metroidvania, even though it might seem like one. Instead, it's more of a survival exploration game where you navigate a living ecosystem and must adapt to your surrounding. What confuses many players is that the game's art style suggests a cute platformer, but the gameplay is challenging and obscure in ways that few games are. You can easily wander into endgame areas right from the start, and unlike games like Dark Souls where you can tell which enemies are too powerful for you, Rainworld doesn't provide that kind of clear guidance. To enjoy Rainworld, you need to be willing to invest time and learn its systems. While this has driven some players away, it has also drawn in a dedicated fan base who appreciate what the game is trying to accomplish. It can be frustrating, but those who stick with it often end up loving it. The Last Guardian, a PlayStation exclusive from 2016, is a game that sparks debate among players. Some people think it's a mess, while others believe it's a brilliant masterpiece. Those who view it as a masterpiece often agree that it can be tough to get into. When playing games, we generally expect consistency. The rules should be clear and the feedback should be immediate, making sure we know we've done something right. However, The Last Guardian intentionally breaks this rule. You play as a young boy, and most of the puzzles revolve around guiding a giant creature called Trico. Trico looks like a mix of a bird, cat, and dog. To direct it, you mostly shout its name Trico and hope for the best. In many ways, it's like pressing a button and hoping for a result. But Trico is a creature with its own mind. Sometimes it listens, and sometimes it doesn't. You'll have to encourage Trico by feeding it or clearing obstacles, but it's never clear what it wants or how to make it act. This can be frustrating. There are moments when you don't know what Trico is supposed to do, or worse, when you know exactly what you want it to do but it refuses. The game can be infuriating at times and very hard to figure out. Many players give up because of these issues, but if you stick with it, The Last Guardian is worth the struggle. The bond between the boy and Trico is one of the most touching relationships in gaming, and the ending is one of the most dramatic and intense in any game. XCOM 2 is a tactical strategy game that can be intimidating for new players. The game is not weird or boring, but rather it is extremely challenging. Many players start a new game, play for a few hours, and then find themselves in a difficult situation that forces them to restart. The first few hours of gameplay can be unforgiving with limited resources and a small team of soldiers. If a key soldier is injured, it can be disastrous. Missions often have time limits, and failing to complete them within the time frame can result in infinite enemy reinforcements or instant failure. The challenge lies in learning what to research and build first as the enemy becomes increasingly difficult to defeat. If players do not manage their resources effectively, upgrade their base optimally, or pursue the right research, they will quickly fall behind the enemy. This can lead to a cycle of failure where completing missions becomes increasingly difficult, resulting in fewer rewards and a downward spiral. For many players, the first major failure is where they give up, and if you add the War of the Chosen expansion, the game becomes even more challenging. However, once you get past the initial hurdles, XCOM 2 is an enjoyable game. It just takes time to learn the ropes and get into the flow. When you begin Death Stranding to play, it's easy to feel frustrated. The world feels empty, the gameplay is slow, and you spend a lot of time walking or climbing with a heavy load of packages. There are no big battles or fast-paced action, just long journeys across rugged terrain. For many, this was a big turnoff at the start. The controls take time to get used to, and the camera angles can feel awkward, making it seem like the game isn't offering much fun at first. However, as you spend more time with Death Stranding, things begin to change. The more you play, the more you start to appreciate the world Kojima has created. You begin to understand the importance of every delivery, as each one helps rebuild the world and connects you to other players in subtle ways. The strange world you're navigating is a reflection of these themes, and the more you uncover, the more you feel emotionally connected to Sam and the other characters. The emotional weight of the story, paired with stunning visuals and a beautiful soundtrack, turns Death Stranding into a game that is hard to forget. You find yourself caring about the characters and wanting to see the story through to the end, even if it takes time and effort to get there.
Right.
Days Gone is a game that stands out for being quite different from others in its genre. It received a lot of criticism from reviewers when it was first released, with many of the initial reviews being harsh and the game struggling to make a positive impression. The story starts off kind of slow, with lots of time spent on missions that don't really seem important. You spend a lot of time driving your bike and getting familiar with the world, which might feel repetitive. The protagonist, Deacon St. John, seemed like a generic character and the dialogue was sometimes cringeworthy. But if you stick with the game, you will find that it gets more interesting as it progresses. The story starts to pick up and new characters are introduced who are more relatable and engaging. Deacon, the main character, also becomes more likable as the game goes on. The game becomes more intriguing and the player is eventually able to take on large hordes of zombies, which is one of the game's highlights. These intense battles against hundreds of zombies are thrilling and unique, and they allow the player to use their weapons in creative and satisfying ways. The game's ability to deliver these exciting moments makes it worth playing even if the first few hours are tough to get through. The game is definitely worth sticking with as it has a lot to offer once you get past the initial slow start. At first, Dark Souls series feels like an impossible challenge designed to make you suffer. Many players rage quit, swearing they'll never play it again, but those who push through the frustration and keep trying often find themselves completely hooked. Unlike most modern games, Dark Souls doesn't give you detailed instructions. It barely tells you where to go or what to do. You are left to figure things out on your own, which can be confusing and overwhelming. Combat in Dark Souls is punishing. Enemies hit hard and even the weakest foes can kill you if you're not careful. Death is a constant companion, and every time you die, you lose all the souls, which is the game's currency for leveling up and buying items you've collected. To make matters worse, you have to retrieve them by returning to the spot where you died, and if you die again before getting them back, they're gone forever. Losing a large amount of souls feels devastating. Imagine grinding for an hour, finally gathering enough to level up, only to die and lose it all. For many players, this is the breaking point. They quit, vowing never to touch the game again. But once you get past the initial hate, Dark Souls reveals itself as a masterpiece. For many players, there's a moment when everything clicks. It might happen when you finally defeat a boss that's been stomping you into the ground for hours. Suddenly, the frustration turns into triumph and realize that Dark Souls isn't just about difficulty. And there you have it, some of the greatest games that many players absolutely hated at first but ended up loving later. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more content. And if there's a game you hated at first but ended up loving, leave a comment below and let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.